Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear and see me okay. Well, this is the first live stream that I've done, so let's see if it's successful. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm sure my neighbour through the wall can. I hope you also like my board. I don't know if everything is actually backwards for you though, or if you can actually read that, so that might not be much help to anybody out there. So the plan for this stream is I'm going to go through essay writing top tips, because obviously a lot of you will be having to mark your own work, will having to self-assess in order to make sure that actually it meets the predicted grade that you want, because obviously the current situation with everything that's going on is that you now need to compile evidence in order to help your teachers give you an accurate an accurate grade for how well you're doing. If you can hear and see me all right, if someone just pops a comment just so that I know that you are able, that I am communicating loud and clear before I get started. Oh, it's all good. Thank you, Martina, most appreciated. All right, so these are my recommendations for top tips for essays. These may be not what all of your other teachers tell you, but this is what I think that you need to do in order to get really, really good essays. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to keep your introductions nice and short. Get on with your essay, get on with it. So in an introduction, have a look at what the question is asking you. Who are the key names? What do they argue? And most importantly, what is your line of argument going to be? How are you going to go for or against the question? So this leads into the second one, which is line of argument. This is the most fundamental thing that you have to do. So line of argument is the difference between a C, D and a B, A grade. If you get a good line of argument, you're straight into the Bs and the A grades. If you don't get off the fence, if you don't get that line of argument in there, you will really struggle to get off the low Cs, high Ds. So by line of argument, what I mean is, what is your viewpoint on the question? So even if the question says strengths and weaknesses of Plato, you still need to say, is Plato's argument convincing or not? Use your own critical words. So it's so important to have a line of argument. You have to evaluate. You have to actually argue something. You have to say something in your essay that isn't just textbook. The third thing that I recommend, and this is something that students generally don't tend to do, what students tend to do in the essays that I read is that by using other names, you think you're evaluating. So by using Dawkins or Peter Geach or Freud, whoever it might be, by using these names, you think, oh, I'm evaluating. You're not. You're just stating their point of view. You're just stating their argument. You have to give general strengths and weaknesses. So this would just be a simple statement like, a strength of this is interesting because, this is flawed, this argument is plausible. Those are general strengths and weaknesses, and they come from no other place than you. So the more general strengths and weaknesses you can do, the better. The fourth thing that I recommend, and this again is something that students generally don't always do. So for those of you that are having to go back through and self-assess your essays, really try to make sure that you do this, and that is evaluate all names used. So many of you, because obviously the PowerPoints are dense with names, the syllabus is dense with names, you bring in loads of names. So Skinner would support this, or Descartes would support that. They are fantastic. It shows the reader that you have a real good understanding. But what you're not doing is you're not evaluating them. So if Skinner supports Dawkins' view of the soul, brill. So what? Do something about Skinner. What makes Skinner's argument a good argument? What makes Skinner strong, so that because he supports Dawkins, that makes Dawkins' argument even stronger? Whereas what a lot of you do is say, this person's similar to this person, and then you move on. But he might be similar to this person, but you have to evaluate. What are we on, number 5? So structuring the question, structuring your answer, based on the name in the question. So this is something that I've been talking to you about very recently, more than anything else. This is something that's come out quite recent. If in the question you have a name, so for example, critically assess Aquinas' teleological argument, the whole essay has to be structured with Aquinas. Every paragraph has to start with Aquinas. Do not start any paragraph with Paley. Do not start any paragraph with Hume. The question asks for Aquinas, you give them Aquinas. So every paragraph starts with Aquinas, and then you can bring in other names afterwards. So even if it's something as simple as Aquinas' teleological argument does not work, this can be seen in Hume's criticism. That's fine, but make sure it's structured. Similarly, if you get a comparison question, so if you get a question, for example, on Plato and Aristotle, so critically assess Plato's theory of forms compared to Aristotle's prime mover. Probably Plato's form of the good probably would be more of a likely question. But if you get a question like that, again, structure with Plato. Plato's name comes first, structure your essay with Plato, structure your paragraphs just like it's structured in the question. If it's Plato with Aristotle, every paragraph is then Plato with Aristotle, Plato with Aristotle. Even if you are not going to support Plato, you can then criticize him and say why Aristotle is better. If you're going to support Plato, you can support him and then say why Aristotle is better. So it works very, very nicely. 6th tip is comparisons are not evaluations. So many students think that if they compare people's names, it means that you are comparing, you're evaluating, sorry. So for example, let me think of a different, who might we compare other than Plato and Aristotle? Nothing's coming to mind. We'll go with Plato and Aristotle. So if you have to compare names in a question, just saying Plato says this, Aristotle says this, that is not evaluation. Now, it sounds very simple when I say it like that, but the amount of times students do not actually evaluate, they do just compare. You juxtapose arguments against each other and assume that you're actually evaluating. That is not evaluation. So it's the idea that if you present Plato, you have to then give your general strengths and weaknesses. If you use Aristotle against him as a comparison, great, but you have to then say what the general strengths and weaknesses of Aristotle would be. The 7th one is do little mini summaries as you go along. Go back to the question, go back to your line of argument, especially because you might have dense paragraphs of information, bringing this name and this name and this a bit of evaluation and this bit of evaluation. So bring your reader back to your line of argument, bring your reader back to the question, signpost your essay, let them know where you are and what you're doing. The 8th one would be to of course, this is the one that I drill you all the time. Use the words in the question throughout your answer. Now, you are blessed in that you can self-assess and proofread the mock papers and the evidence that you compile. Go through and highlight your answers for the words in the question. Have you used all the words in that question throughout your answer? Is it clear, if I didn't read the question, what your answer would be answering? Is it clear what you are trying to argue? Number 9, stick to one theme per paragraph. Now, this again is key to making your essays really, really good for your readers. So it's the idea that, so similar to the one that you've already been set for your mock, if you get one on religious experience is a minefield of a topic. Don't start a paragraph with William James, then don't start a paragraph on an example, then bring in Freud, then bring in another example, then bring... It's like, where are you going? What are you doing? For a reader, it's very, very hard to follow. So if you want to structure an essay on William James, structure an essay on William James and then bring your examples in for him. If you want to structure it on examples, do examples and then link to William James. Pick a theme and follow that structure so that you're not jumping all over the place. Let a reader know where you're going and what you're doing. And the final tip for just your general essay writing is give examples. Again, this is something that students always forget. Even if you make yourself little notes at the top of your essays, give examples. So give recent examples of what's going on in the world. Give examples from the news. Give examples, just your general examples. So I give examples constantly give examples to help you understand things. So talk to your reader like they don't understand the topic. Don't think it's me that's reading your work and I know what you're talking about. Treat me like I don't know anything. Give a parent your essay to read at home. See if they understand what you're saying and what you're arguing, because you'll have to teach that topic to them. So, for example, Anselm's ontological argument, we use several different examples. You know, it's better to have £1 million in real life than in your own head. Use that as an example. So give examples to really help your reader understand what it is that you're saying. At this point, this is probably when the tumbleweed will happen. Before I go into the kind of the how to get the A's and the A stars, does anyone have any questions? Is there any questions about how to write an essay, how to write a good essay, anything that you're struggling with? Because then I'll go into, you know, how to get the top end grades, how to get the A's and the A stars. So does anyone have any questions? I talked a lot then. It's also my birthday. So we can hurry this up so I can go and eat lots of cake on my own in self-isolation. Thanks, Martina. All right, folks, let me do... hi, guys. Oh, well, that soon got you all joining in. Thanks, folks. I feel less alone now. This time last year, as some of you know, I was in Rome. So we were in Rome. We'd had a really early start this time last year because we had an audience with the Pope. So we had an audience with the Pope last year, and this year we are self-isolating. Well, since it looks like not many of you have any questions, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to have questions. It's just nice to hear that there are people in the world out there. I'll go into my top A star things that you need to think, and they're right on the bottom of the board, which you probably can't see at all. So this is one that some of you did actually ask for. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, let's have a look. Constantly answering the question. Constantly answering the question. So constantly answer the question, because with your paragraphs might be quite long. So if an examiner, so if there's keywords in a question, if an examiner read, or obviously your teacher at this point, if your teacher read through, would those words in the question jump out all the time? Beginning and end of a paragraph is not enough. So links to the question all the way through, saying how it's linking, how you're arguing it. That's what the line of argument helps, because it might feel really repetitive for you, but it isn't as a reader. So line of argument is whether it's for or against the question. So everything you're writing should be to do with a line of argument. So you do that automatically. But the summaries at the end of the paragraph is to say how everything you've said so far links all together for that. So I would say the more times you can link something to the question, the better. I hope that helps. How would you phrase a line of argument? It purely depends on the question. So a line of argument is, so let me think of an example. Natural law is useful when dealing with issues surrounding euthanasia, something like that. Your line of argument is, it is useful or it's not useful. That would be your line of argument. So you would just say that in an essay. You would say it in an introduction. So you would start an essay something like, natural law is established by Dominican monk St. Thomas Aquinas, based on using our reason to understand what is right and wrong within nature, something like that. And this argument can be seen as useful because it is universal to everyone as it's structured with reason, and this essay will explore fully why. Something like that. Okay, it's not a very good introduction, but you're still giving the examiner a little taste of what your essay will be about. You could start even your first sentence with, St. Thomas Aquinas' argument is not useful because, and that can even be your introduction. So get your line of argument, and your line of argument is just whether you go for or against the question. How do you know? I don't know if I'm following what you mean. BPS. How do you not repeat what you say in the essay in your conclusion? Do you mean how do you make sure the conclusion's not repetitive from the essay? Is that what you're meaning? I'll go with that's what you're meaning. I think that is. Your conclusion doesn't have any new information in it. So don't forget, your essays might be 2 pages long. That's a lot for somebody. And especially because obviously your work this year will be marked by your teacher rather than examiner. But in previous years, an examiner might mark 20 essays a night. Having a conclusion isn't repetitive. You're just reminding them of your key names and the key things that you've talked about. So if your question is on Darwin's evolution for teleological argument, for example, you might say all the way through that evolution is the best argument. Your conclusion would be then, in conclusion, it is clear from the arguments presented that evolution is the most convincing argument because of this is supported by Dawkins, who is backed up by therefore Aquinas doesn't work. That would be a fine conclusion. So you're not repeating yourself, you're just bringing it all together. I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense and that was what you were asking. Are there any other questions, folks? These are really, really good. Okay, I'll go into my top tips for the year A star. Oh, good. That's good. I'll go into my top tips for the year A star, and then if you do have any other questions, I'll do them again in just the next short bit. So I've already mentioned now synoptic links. Now, this is one question that one of my students did ask before we left, so to speak. How to do synoptic links. Now, synoptic links are when you've done all of these other things that I've just talked about. Do not attempt doing a synoptic link if you haven't already got a very, very good essay. These are the bits you add in at the end. So a synoptic link is where you show the reader a holistic understanding of the topic. So the example I've given on my board back there is Aquinas. So Aquinas pops up everywhere. Aquinas is throughout the whole of this course. So if you've got a question on Aquinas' conscience, why not bring in a little bit of natural law? If you've got Aquinas' conscience, it's still the same Aquinas that comes up in Body, Mind and Soul or wherever it is. It's still the same person. So bring in that understanding to other topics. St. Augustine's another one. He comes in everywhere. As soon as you mention anything to do with great, God's grace, whatever topic it might be, bring in St. Augustine. As soon as you hear the word God's grace, you should be thinking of Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer talks about God's grace. That's how you do synoptic links. So a synoptic link is very, very quick. It's not don't go rambling into another name. But if you let's talk about exclusivism. Exclusivism, the idea that only Christians will get to go to heaven. This is an idea that is supported by St. Augustine. When we did inclusivism in class on St. Augustine, he was a name we mentioned in passing, but we did a whole topic in the first year on St. Augustine. So link all that information back in there. And when you're talking about the grace of God, then just drop in a sentence like, this will be supported by Bonhoeffer, who talks about God's grace. God's grace is this is a strong argument, a weak argument, whatever it is in line with your line of argument to with your essay. So if you're going against exclusivism, then you would criticise St. Augustine, you would criticise Bonhoeffer. The second one is link all your paragraphs together. What I mean by that is don't chunk. Don't chunk, right? Chunk, done, summary. Chunk, done, summary. Try and keep a way of flowing it together. So signpost your essay. This might be something as simple as, to truly understand whether religious experiences are individual or not, let's explore another example. That is signposting. That says then to the reader, oh, we're going to have a look at another example now. So signpost to your reader where you're going in your paragraphs, what your structuring it is. Or if you've just absolutely slated somebody and you want to keep going, then put a sentence like, arguably, are there any strengths with William James? Put sentences to help the reader see what you're actually going to do. Are you going to have a look at some strengths? Or are you just going to criticise further? The last couple are fairly straightforward to do, even though they do get the top end marks. One of them is to add little bits of detail. So, for example, in the introduction I said to you a little while ago, I said Dominican monk, St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay, it's the idea that you're showing a reader that you know those little bits of information. So find where they used to teach, find where, what their religious view is. For example, I was doing the situation ethics quiz for the blog. You'll see it on if you go onto your Test Your Knowledge. And I was doing a little bit of research towards that. I never realised that Joseph Fletcher was an Anglican before he then lost his Christian faith and went just for situation ethics. Little bits like that stand out to a reader who's read the same essay over and over again. Give those little bits of information to a reader and set the scene, plump it out, make it a story, really take them on a journey through that answer. And the last one is wider research. Don't just use the information your teachers have given you. Don't just use the textbooks or my PowerPoints. Give them a little bit more, because, for example, I don't want to just read, for the A's and the A stars this is, I don't just want to read my information. Again, I wrote the information. I had to read the information to begin with. I know the information. Give me something else where I go, oh, I didn't know that. That's what happened years ago with the John Hick from Scarborough. A student had just dropped into an essay. John Hick, who was born in Scarborough. I thought, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow, let's have a look at that, into that more. So give the reader some little bits of wider research to show that you've really gone to that next step. Certainly your top texts as well, Malaris Dignitatum and all of those, have a look into them. So for many of you, I know it's not one of your mock areas, but for the gender and theology and gender and society, you all go down the Christianity and slating St. Paul, but you didn't actually understand the context of the scriptures that he actually wrote and how he was actually trying to defend women. So really know, if you use a book, find a little bit more out about it. Finally, obviously, these are just my recommendations. These are just the things that I've found over the years of marking. I do like language, like to an extent, or arguably, I find that works really well in an essay. So to an extent this, even if the words aren't in the question, to an extent this, to an extent that, and arguably, it just always, don't use it all the way through, obviously, and find synonyms of it. But the word arguably, St. Thomas Aquinas can be seen as plausible, because his argument is implausible, obviously, so, use words like that. And obviously the other top one up here is usually critical words like plausible, convincing, critical, etc. So those are the things that I could think of off the top of my head as far as areas to really focus and look at. But once you've got your essays, once you've written whatever it is, and you go through each one of these to make sure you've done it, that's basically the checklist I use. Have they got the critical words? Have they got general evaluation? Have they evaluated every name? Have they, made links to the question? These are the things that I look for throughout, because this is what links to the AO1 and the AO2 criteria. Are there any other questions that you have. So please, any other questions that you've got, now is the time to speak to me. I hope you're all doing all right as well. It seems like it's been a very long week. So I hope you're all, finding your way around all of your work, etc., and doing okay. And obviously there is just emails or through the blog if you need me. The plan is that hopefully you found this successful. So the plan is that I will do another one of these on Monday at 10, because it gives me a little bit of time to actually wake up. So I'll do the next one on Monday at 10, but it'll be specifically on business ethics, because I'm going to start going through all the topics with the first years together. So that's when more questions. So obviously for the second years, it's not one of your mock questions, but if you are needing to do a bank of essays, drop a line onto the business one if you want to, because then you could always do an essay on business ethics, etc. So the plan is that I will do one on business on Monday, and start doing them, every week from there. Right. Do you know if results day will be pushed forward on the team? Tabby, no idea. Don't have a clue about results day. There will be results something. So at the moment we're still going by the results day is the results day, but at the moment we don't know what the process is going to be. So we're just doing it so that we get the work together. We then mark all the work and get a predicted grade. We're then on the understanding that there might be some sort of formal standardization, but how that will happen, when that will happen, how they will, authorize the predicted grades that we've given, I don't know how long that process will be. So as soon as we know anything actually set in stone, we'll tell you immediately. But at this point, I'm hoping, there was even talks of us having an end of year party or something on the field and getting the students there. I hope something like that will happen where we can all come together, because obviously the last couple of days was just pretty awful, really. So I'm hoping that we will get to come together at some point. For the question, a God of love would not deny anyone salvation. Hi, Hannah. A God of love. So an omnibenevolent God would not deny anyone salvation. I talk about pluralism. I talk about election. It depends on your line of argument. So explore why a God of love, what the issue there is to begin with. So why a God of love, what does that mean? What does that imply? And then the idea of, would God deny? Don't forget as well, you could talk about things like purgatory. You could do death and afterlife synoptic links here. So talk about, would God send everyone to heaven? Would God pass judgment so that only exclusive to Christians? Would God allow everybody pluralistically to go into heaven? But then is there a purgatory? But then certain Christian denominations don't believe in purgatory. So that one is kind of a mix between death and afterlife and your pluralism and theology topics. So I would first of all start by picking your line of argument. Do you think a God of love would let everybody be saved? And also, don't forget, we came across things like this in Problem of Evil with people like Irenaeus saying, this idea of you've turned your back on God, etc., therefore you're damned to hell. I would go through all your topics and and find as many synoptic links as you can to this idea of an afterlife, a loving God, judgment, bring all of that in, goats and the sheep, the lot. So this is why that question was asked, is because I want you to think about all the different areas, but keep your structure clear, keep your line of argument clear. So the first thing is, what is your line of argument? But talking of pluralism and election, fine, no problem at all. Just evaluate everything, obviously. Hope that helps, Hannah. Any others? Thank you. All right, folks, if there is, will this live channel, was it? Yes. So hopefully it just saves it automatically. So it'll be on, I think therefore I teach on YouTube, but I'll probably also embed it at some point. It might take me a little while to work it out. I'll try and embed it into the blog as well so that you can just click straight on it and get taken over. So I'll find ways of making this accessible, because obviously I know I've gone through this very, very quick, Lizzie, so you'll probably want to go through it step by step. So yeah, no problem. I will make sure that if it's either accessible on YouTube, which it should do automatically, and then I'll try and embed it in the blog as well so you can get easy access. Fine. That would work really well. So yeah, if you wanted to do a whole so on our loving God, on the death and afterlife, that would work. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. Again, and this is something that the examiners, obviously, if you'd had the opportunity to have your work marked by the examiners are not ever looking for things in particular. So, for example, in the past, students have wrote answers on a completely different topic, come out the exam and thought, oh my goodness, that's a conscience question, and I've wrote it from meta ethics or whatever it is. And as long as you answer the question and you clearly answer the question and you have a line of argument to do with the question, this is why the question is your key. If everything you put links to the question, they have to give you the marks, and your teachers will stick by that as well. That it doesn't matter what topic you link it to, as long as what you are linking it to is very clear how it goes back to the question, and then you're absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Any other final ones before we call it a day on our live feed? Not bad, nearly just over 30 minutes, and that's good. All right, folks, so Monday, that is the plan, and I'll probably more than likely be dropping in with my second years on next Friday. So I'll see what is going to be other videos that are going to be run this week. So I'll see what the videos are going to be run as far as your mock exam. See if there's areas that you want to go over with me. So I might send an email out just to say, what do you want to do with, what do you want me to go over next Friday? But I think the Friday is a good way of just stopping and picking up where we're up to. And I'll probably be doing these through Easter as well. There's nothing, especially if we're stuck inside. So I might as well keep doing these through Easter. So I'll send an email out at some point to see what requests we have and how best I can help you. So Monday, Friday is looking like the days. Monday, Friday at 10 are looking like the days that I'm going to do some live streams for you guys. Right, folks. Hope you found that useful. Please do keep in touch. Keep safe. Keep washing your hands, etc. And yeah, just keep in touch, everyone. All right, guys. Bye for now. See you later, everyone. Bye, bye, bye.